I'm going to invite my guest uh, on now. There he is.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning, but you're in the Netherlands, so good afternoon to you.
Good morning to you, Marissa.
So glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So I'd like to introduce you to everyone who's tuning in. Payam is a modern day medicine man and a visionary, in my opinion, and a plant medicine facilitator, and probably so many other things. A multifaceted human being, and I'm so honored to have you here. And I'm hoping that maybe you can just start by telling everyone a little bit about yourself and about your journey and how you got to
Sure.
this realm.
Yeah, thank you. First, I wanted to acknowledge you, Marissa, for opening up the conversation. First and foremost, I think it's really important for different practitioners to start to talk about modalities that may not necessarily be at the forefront of their practice or maybe even on their radar,
Hmm.
and create conversation and perhaps be open to the legitimacy of work that's out there that may not be necessarily validated by the Western paradigm. So thank you for doing that, and I hope that as these conversations happen, as this discourse takes place, more and more people become aware. So thank you. Um,
Hmm.
and as we discussed, I just wanted to first acknowledge my teachers, my mentors, Dr. Richard Schwartz of IFS, Dr. Gabor Mate of Compassionate Inquiry, Dr. Peter Levine of Somatic Experiencing, Dr.
Hmm.
John Douglas, the plants and the animals that have been my guide, as well as the people that I work with, the seekers who are my immediate teachers. So thank you, everyone, for being there for me and informing my wisdom, whatever I may have. So thank you. Um, so Marissa, yeah, people ask me what the hell do you do? And in short, I work with plant medicines. I work with some synthetic compounds. I work with some earth medicines, and basically, I help people unfold and become open to parts of themselves that have been shielded or been placed in the shadow as a coping mechanism as they grew up because of certain traumas that they may have experienced. So I work namely with people who have trauma on one level or another. Yeah, I use these compounds that are really beautiful and revelatory and they can be very kind and very gentle, or they can rattle you and shake you up and spit you out, depending on what people are open to working with and what the right protocol is for them, and helping people really unfold and remove these blockages that are manifested from our mind, that can manifest in the body, and help people live a better life if they choose to do that.
Amazing, amazing. And to me, that is true healing is when we dive deep, when we dig deeper and get to the root cause of what is causing disease and dysfunction or disharmony in the body. I mean, that's really what my medicine is about getting to the root. And you know, I've been in practice for 5 years as a doctor. I've been in health and wellness for 20 years. And what I find is that most physical manifestations of disease are rooted in trauma. Most mental health issues are rooted in trauma. I would say mostly everything is rooted in trauma and something that happened to the person, you know, whether that's individual or it's generational trauma. I think that's some
Collective.
collective trauma
Yeah,
too. So it's
yeah.
something so interesting. And you know, maybe you can speak a little bit more about that collective trauma and generational
Sure.
trauma. Hmm.
Yeah. Um, You asked really excellent questions, Marissa, and I wish we had. Oh yeah, and there's a puppy right there to help along.
There's
Thank
pups.
you. Yes. Um, so I think that you know, these topics are worth really uh, they're worth discussion. They're worth time. They're worth attention. And we had talked about normalizing, being okay with discussing our traumas, right?
Yes.
Acknowledging that we are, as a society, in trauma. We exist out of trauma, and trauma can take many different forms. There's intergenerational trauma, there's acute trauma, there's systematic trauma, systemic trauma. You have microaggressions that can ultimately develop as trauma. So there's many different ways of looking at trauma and acknowledging that it can exist within us. Birth trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and it can go so far back as to get into our implicit memory that has no words, memory that's all based on emotion or feeling. So to normalize that, to open up the discourse, and I know you work primarily with women, a wider audience of yours is women,
Mm-hmm.
and I tend to actually I work with women as well. Unfortunately, there tends to be a lot of sexual trauma that I work with. But even when I speak with men and I say, yeah, I work with sexual trauma, and immediately their shields go out. No, well, no, that's not me. I'm like, I'm not suggesting that's you. I'm just saying that that's part of the population that I work with. That to me is an indication that people are actually have trauma, and they block it up. So to acknowledge that trauma exists and normalize that conversation, make it okay for people to discuss that, right? And trauma, like, I mean, I actually made notes, and it can go in so many different directions. But I was thinking about what is trauma, what you define as trauma, what can we normalize, and trauma could take two forms. Trauma could be things that happened to us that shouldn't have happened, and things that didn't happen to us that should, right? So there's two things, and we take on energy that doesn't belong to us as a result of that, in case of sexual trauma, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Or we take on meaning or distortions based on things that didn't happen for us. And then we're very resilient human beings. So what do? We adapt in that state. And, it could be, if it's trauma that's happening for a long period of time, if you're a minority and you're constantly being discriminated, it's something that is ongoing. But essentially what happens is we lose power, we lose a connection from our essential self, we lose connection from our soul, and we enter into a state, and from that state it becomes a trait, and that trait becomes our personality, and we take on that personality as what we think we are.
Right.
And interesting enough, a lot of these personality traits are rewarded in the capitalistic materialistic culture. Work harder, run away from yourself, keep on doing instead of being, and essentially you're running away from yourself and seeking happiness from the outside and fulfillment from the outside, and running away from the pain that's on the inside, right? So you have that element of trauma, and again, people are just operating. And again, if you've got someone who's a workaholic, what's going to happen to them? Something's going to give, and these are the people that you may be treating, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And and then we can talk about the walls and the containers that uphold people and influence the way they present. But then if you think about intergenerational trauma, which is really fascinating. I just worked with someone who's actually in treatment with another clinic, and he's receiving ketamine. And we did an integration session, and I said to this person, I said, you are the amalgamation of shit taught to you by disordered people.
Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, so when you're born as a child, you have an attachment figure, to your caretaker, to your parents. They're disordered. They have things that they've never really met or resolved, especially older generations.
Mm-hmm.
So they're traumatized people that are putting their trauma onto you, their expectations, their distortions, and expecting you to yield to their perception of what is normal, which gets us away from our essential self. So that traumatizes us from the very beginning of life. And again, and backwards and backwards and backwards, and ad infinitum, it goes back to the beginning of time. So normalizing the conversation can be a really beautiful thing because we start to notice, holy shit, oh my God, I realized what happened to my mom is in me. What happened to her mom was in my mom, which is now in me. And I, when I work with parents who have major issues, I say, you know what, I'm doing this for you, but I'm doing this for your kids. And they don't
Yeah.
understand what that means. And I said, you know what, I'm doing this for you, but I'm hopefully doing this so the cycle of trauma can break, and so you don't give it to your future generations. Which is
Yeah.
really powerful, and it's actually a motivator for parents to be like, okay, I'm not only doing this for myself, I'm really doing this for my kids. And in doing so, you're actually healing past generations. So to again normalize the conversation, to open up discussion, and then look at it honestly, and then be like, oh, I realize I'm carrying this stuff. Now, how do I heal with it? Right?
Yeah.
There's many different ways of approaching it. There's many different schools. My approach tends to be kind of direct, and it goes to the point. It goes to the source. And these compounds that I work with can lift the veil and be like, here you go, you know. And there's other practices, and just because the medicine's there doesn't mean you need to take it, right?
Yeah.
So there are people that are not necessarily suited for this work, right? And they may go to a different therapist or a different practitioner and seek out help there. But what I do is pretty directed.
Can you talk a little bit more about who is not suited for this work? I mean, in my opinion, like in my professional opinion, people with severe mental health disorders or, people who are on a lot of medications that are affecting their psychology, those are probably people who I wouldn't recommend this type of
Sure,
medicine to.
sure,
Do you agree? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
sure. Yes to some of what you said, and then maybe some things that need to be looked at. Okay, so let's look at mental disorder or mental dis-ease, right? And we look at what is the source of dis-ease up here, right? And it could be rooted or sourced from many other facets of life that can contribute to the disharmony that you're experiencing, right? So if you have depression, what are you trying to depress, right? Maybe it's things that you've had to depress all your life. You had to depress yourself, make yourself smaller, or make yourself bigger by eating. Because if you're bigger as a woman, you're not sexually attractive to your
Mhm.
father-in-law or whoever that's been taking advantage of you sexually, or your
Mhm.
stepdad, for instance. I'm just using a loose example, right? So we look at how we've adapted and how these adaptations have potentially served us, but sometimes these adaptations, as we look at it and consider it, no longer serve us, and that's where people are like, well, there's something wrong and I need to look at it. Or anxiety, general anxiety disorder. So there's all these things, and again, I work with therapists who are referred to me because the people that come to me are seeking my help, right? So I talk with them. I make sure that this person is the right candidate. Yes, schizophrenia, of course, bipolar disorder. There's certain disorders that I'm not qualified and I have no business touching because they're just barely operating, right? So
Right.
I would certainly not want to go in there and scramble people up. Um, it really ultimately requires a desire to want to have a look at yourself, possibly endure some challenges as you're meeting your shadows and being honest with yourself, and maybe looking at things that you've been carrying that have caused you pain, and with the right support, whether it's with your facilitator and your therapist, and the container that upholds you to help you heal and move forward.
Yeah.
So yes, there are certain people that are not good candidates for it, and there are some people that may be good candidates for it biologically, but the containers in place around them may not necessarily be helpful or maybe conducive to their healing. So those are elements that we need to look at as well.
Yeah, wonderful. I like all of that. And I think it's important, number one, to be trauma informed when you're doing this work. I think in both of our worlds, understanding that everyone has some degree of trauma in their lives, and just understanding also that you brought up a good point that the person has to want this kind of healing, right? I have found we cannot force or cajole or convince anyone of any type of healing or evolution or any of this. So I imagine the people that come to you, the people that are referred to you, like they're ready. They probably reached a breaking point where they can't go on living any longer. I mean, that was my experience with plant medicine in 2014 when I went to Peru, and did a pretty long retreat using the
Yeah.
plant medicine ayahuasca for healing. I had reached a point where I just could not go on living the way I was living. I could not suffer and carry these things with me any longer. I had just
Yeah.
reached a breaking point. So for the people that you're working with, is there any homework beforehand? Like, do you have any books that you recommend they read, or should they jump into the practices of doing shadow work? Is there anything kind of that you screen or you have people do before they work with you?
Yeah, some really good questions again, and you pointed to a few things, Marissa, that I want to maybe touch on as well. Um, yeah, people generally get to a point where they realize that things are not working anymore. Things are just not working anymore. Um, and the symptoms can present in many different ways. There could be disharmony in your marriage. There could be, uh, whatever. Your relationship with food could be unhealthy, your relationship professionally, but really, ultimately, these are rooted in very, very old programming. It's very old
Mm-hmm.
stuff. The symptoms just happen to show up. So people need to get comfortable with that idea that it's yes, the immediate problem is at hand, and yeah, it sucks, and I can't handle it anymore. But to want to look and be honest and be like, look, I am surrendering to the possibility that things that I'm carrying with me that I don't know about, or I've adapted to them. I use the metaphor of a thorn in our skin. Our bodies are very resilient to cover over the thorn right away, but the thorn is still there, right? So we carry all these thorns in our bodies energetically, even in our soul, right? And we adapt. We tend to avert things that may trigger the thorn, the pain, or something like that, right? And run away from our essential self that is actually being punctured by this thorn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, people need to get to a point to want to have a look, right? Um, I'm referred. I don't necessarily advertise my work. By and large, I've remained sort of underground, but I'm opening up the conversation and be like, I'm here, and I have a unique way of working, and people tend to really resonate with the way I work, right? So to answer your question, do I tell people to do some homework? Nothing can prepare you for this medicine work, really. You
Yes.
know,
True.
nothing, and depending on which compound you use, some of this stuff is insane. I mean, there is no
Mm-hmm.
human language to explain what this stuff is, right? So try to read Michael Pollan's book, and that's good, but your perception of his relationship with 5-MeO DMT maybe colored by his own experience, right?
Right.
So we're reading anecdotal information, and a person sits on the mat and gets shot off to the next world with 5-MeO or Bufo. No way that you can prepare for that, right? It's important to be informed. I'm all about it. Read as much as you want,
Mm-hmm.
be informed, understand why you're doing this work, right? But it's really important, and I stress this when I first do a call with someone. First I take a call, and I want to make sure that they're the right candidate and they're the right place and they're doing this with the right intention. And if
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to be of service to them, so I give them my time, because this is it's an ongoing relationship, and it's a sacred relationship, and it's sacred work, and it's to be treated as such. So I give 1 hour of my time with someone, and I speak with them and see where they're at. What I say to people is, see if what I say to you is resonant, if what I'm saying to you makes sense, and if it doesn't make sense, you need to pay attention to that. You know, um, and I really, like I said, do a 1 hour call and then explain what I do. Is this resonant with you or not? These people are referred to me by someone who I've worked with. So there is already that immediate level of trust that's there, as opposed to, reading something on some TripAdvisor website as to which,
Yeah.
retreat to go to and which shaman to sit with. So those elements are not even a factor in my relationship with the people that come to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's important. It's important to inform yourself and understand. But really, if I were to tell you like, can something really prepare you for it? No, because you don't know what's going to rise up.
That's true.
And so in saying this, you know, it sounds like all this scary monsters are going to come out of the shadows and bite your ass. But no, it could be a very beautiful, beautiful experience of unifying with the universal energy and realizing that, you know, your body is a facade. You know, it's just a shell that holds you, and everything is all
Mhm.
one. And you know, it could be an incredible revelatory experience that could shift your perspective on how you see yourself in this madness. And how we're just a speck of dust and we mean nothing, but we mean everything as such, you know, because
True.
every moment really matters. Because before you know it, you leave your body and that's it. So what are you going to do with yourself while you're here? So,
Mhm.
you know, there's a wide gamut of experience, and I speak to the things that show up, and I do address the things that may get difficult because that can be very real. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. But again, like I said, it could be a really beautiful, amazing experience. The first or second session, the third session, oh crap, I didn't realize this was in there.
Yeah. And just realizing that all of those different things that come up, they're all a part of our personality. Like it's all within us, you know,
Yep.
the demons and the shadows and the dancers and the goddesses and the gods, and like all of it is this divine like orchestration of all the different parts of being human. I love that. And you know, something we talked about yesterday was or in a previous conversation was how, you know, there's a lot of, the FDA is approving a lot of plant medicines and different substances for healing purposes. And you made the point that, like, you know, regular Western trained clinicians, they've never even stepped in the realm of what happens during a plant medicine, during a visionary
Yeah.
experience. And you know, we had talked about kind of like, how do we bridge that gap
Yeah.
between you know, the way that Western practitioners are trained and what really happens, the transformation and the deep healing that happens during one of these plant medicine experiences. So maybe you can speak a little more to
Yeah.
that. I
Thanks for
find it fascinating, and you know, I just love that you're doing this work because you're intelligent. You know what you're talking about. You've worked with these medicines. Like, I so appreciate that you are an intermediary and you're just that person in the middle who can bridge that gap.
I hope so. I hope so. I can, all I can do is share my truth, and the wisdom that I have, and share with people that are interested and curious, not from a judgmental place, but from a place of truly wanting to um, expand their awareness and incorporate that wisdom into their practice. You made a really great point, and I love the metaphor of the bridge and bridging the gap, and I can get into it. But before I do that, I wanted to point to a couple of language, some language that I'm going to use, and just to explain. So Western medicine I'll use as the reductionist scientific approach, and then Eastern, which can, you know, be a combination of, you know, shamanic medicine in Siberia or South America, or Chinese medicine. So I'll refer to that as Eastern for the sake of brevity. So we
Sure.
have those two different approaches. And then if I'm using the word medicine, I may be referring to psychedelics or visionary medicine. So just kind of use your imagination when I use these
Mhm.
words. Um, well, yeah, big question. Where do I start? Okay, so I know that people are in integrity and people want to help. I know that for a fact. I think
Mhm.
that um, the Western paradigm, especially in the medical establishment, is beholden to certain rules and regulations, is beholden to uh, their boards, is beholden to financial interests, is beholden to many constraints. And for me, I'm not beholden to any of those rules. I do whatever the hell I want. I don't answer to anyone. I don't answer to shareholders. I work one on one with one person. I see them through, and we have a relationship that's deep and profound, and that's my relationship. You know, and uh, when you look at the clinical setting, look, those are good as well, you know, and as you know, Marissa, there, wherever you go, there you are, right? Whoever, so you may speak a certain language to certain people that are attracted to it. I may say things for your audience, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm with that." But if someone is, not a believer in spirit or energy, they think this is crazy talk, and
Yeah.
maybe they need to go to the ketamine clinic and sit in that setting because that's appropriate for them.
Mhm.
You cannot bottle spirit up. You cannot material. You can't capitalize on it. People are going to try to capitalize on it, but this stuff comes out of Earth. You take it, you connect to Mother Earth and the source, and that's it. You know. So I really have no business saying, "Well, I'm the intermediary." I'm not. It's between you and the
Yeah.
medicine. That's the relationship. Well, I have certain skill sets, and I do that for people, and I help them a lot. Um, I was at this Horizons talk like 2 years ago, pre-COVID, and there was this venture capitalist there, and he was ready to jump on it. And a lot of people are trying to capitalize on this, and yeah,
Mhm.
it could be beneficial, but again, it's these plants, these medicines have had thousands of years of history. They have a relationship. The facilitators have a relationship with these plants. They understand how to work with them, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, psilocybin synthetic, yeah, maybe that does help, and it does help people. MDMA, sure. Ketamine, yeah. Um, but there's certain compounds and certain, spiritual experiences that really need to be understood through the lens of someone who has a relationship with spirit, um, and understands what the shamanic work is, understands what happens in that context, you know. Um, and that's what it is, and so I'm curious. I want people to heal. God knows we all need it. We all need
Yeah.
it.
Right.
um, and there's different people who offer different methodologies, and different medicines, if you will, and people will be attracted to that. It's really ultimately when I say to people, make sure that the practice, that the person who you're going to, who's offering it, is resonant with your truth, that you feel okay about it, that
Mhm.
you feel like you're connected to this person, that this person is of integrity. This person is going to uphold you. This person is going to honor you. This person is, you're not just some number. You're not just some person that's going to fill this your pocket. This is a
Mhm.
very, very human experience, and a lot of people are going to come out with some really, really terrible stuff. A
Yeah.
sexual trauma is horrendous. The things that I've seen and experienced is horrible. And you
Mhm.
go to a center, they shoot you off, and then are like, "Well, have a nice day." And I've seen a lot of people come to me actually super damaged because of that, re-traumatized because they got shot off, and then they came back and they said, "Have a nice life."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is a major problem in the community, Marissa.
So can you that fascinating and good segue to something I want you to touch on. Like, what is your process, number one, for holding someone in such a vulnerable space, right? I mean, like you said, like so much comes out of these sessions if someone's willing to surrender to those things coming out. And honestly, that's where the true healing occurs, is when
Yeah,
we can allow those things to express themselves and then move that
absolutely,
energy. But
absolutely.
also, I think you're so right with the post experience, the integration
Yeah,
process. A lot of us are left on our own to like
yeah,
figure out what the hell happened.
yeah,
What was that?
yeah,
Like darkness or demon, or why did I see that image? Like, what does that mean? Is it going to happen? Was it just a figment of my imagination? Like, how do I integrate some of these crazy things that I saw during this visionary kind of process?
yeah,
I would love for you to speak on how, like, the container that you
yeah,
hold. I
yeah.
imagine it's a beautiful container for someone to surrender and
Sure.
heal.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about the psychosocial, the biopsychosocial elements of healing or wellness or disease, and then the spiritual element that I incorporate. So the four walls that contain us, right? And I kind of briefly touched on it, which is, what is surrounding us, what is literally containing ourselves, our bodies, and the things that are containing us. What is our relationship with our families? What is our relationship with our place of worship? On the spiritual aspect, what is our relationship with the food we take? What is our relationship with the environment? How are these things going to help us or hinder us, right?
Mhm.
So that container really needs to be taken into consideration. This is not a this is a very lonely journey. When you have a visionary experience and you go to a psychiatrist, they're like, "Oh, you're hallucinating. Take some, benzos, and then you'll be good." No, well, yeah, you may be hallucinating, but I call that an elevated state of consciousness. We're in a limited state of consciousness right now. We're seeing things on a very finite level. So when
Yes.
we open up to things that not many people are actually conscious of, right? So all those things are there. And I say, when when the snake comes to bite you, jump in its mouth and look through its eyes.
Mhm. Wow.
Embrace, embrace the demons because they're here to teach us something. So
Very wise
I've
words.
seen demons, and
Yeah.
they've come, and
Mhm.
I ask them what their message is. How can I help them as you're manifesting in this body? What do you need? How do you want to go to rest? Let's put you to rest. Do you want to leave the body? Let's take you out of the body. So
Mhm.
this is where the reductionist scientific language just completely disintegrates. Because here I am, having an intelligent conversation with you, and then next thing I know, I'm like, yeah, I talk with demons. So am I out of my mind, or am I in my mind? So
Mhm.
you kind of like, I'm veering off a little bit, but looking at the container, very important, right?
Yes.
The preparation phase to go in and generally I do 4 sessions of about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and sometimes when I take people inside, it can be really emotionally taxing or draining energetically. So I kind of limit it so that they don't run out of juice. But we look at the landscape, we look at what the containers are, we look at what they're dealing with, what their history is, what they're hoping to accomplish. So all those elements are looked at and addressed as best as possible, right? I use the IFS modality to go in and look in the shadows and how people actually interface with their own shadows when they're not even in the medicine, right?
Mhm.
And use those relationships as roadmaps or as trailheads, if you will, as the IFS language refers to them, and go into that. And then the somatic relationship, where does this stuff live in your body, right?
Yeah.
What is your relationship with the knot that's in your stomach? Interesting enough, it has a lot of history, right? So we
Mhm.
establish a relationship with our parts, literally our energetic, physical parts. And when we're in the medicine, there's no surprises, right? At least we know where to go, right? And the other thing that I do in my sessions, I use an anchor. When I'm working with women, it's an absolute must. Otherwise, I don't work with them because I'm in a man's body and I'm working with people who have trauma, who have sexual trauma. So I want to make sure that the container is completely set in the way that they need to be able to unfold the way they need to unfold. I don't have an ego. If you need me to get out of the room so you can be with your brother or your best friend or whatever, because that needs to happen, I'll go sit outside all night long
Mhm.
if that needs to happen, because that's what needs to happen for you. So again, creating the cradle of experience and helping them go through it, whatever it is that needs to unfold. And then the integration phase, where may have reestablished relation with the things that we're carrying, right? Whether they came to us as visions or we were purging, or the things that rose up that we weren't conscious of, excuse me, and reestablishing relationships so we can normalize and harmonize. So that's kind of like the way I work.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Sorry, I've got a little heat going on here. Um, that all sounds amazing, Payam, and I think I'd really like to hear about. I know you're in the Netherlands now. Can
Yep.
you tell everyone that's listening about, your travel? And I know you're going to be coming to the United States later this year. Can you tell us a little bit more about your process with
Sure.
the different places you're traveling to? I just,
Yeah.
I
Sure.
love that you're a traveling shaman.
Sure. Yeah, well, right now it's I wish I was in one place for the sake of many different factors, and people would come to me, but primarily the people that I'm working with are in the States, on the East Coast and on the West Coast, and some in the Midwest. I'm actually going to be getting on a plane exactly a week from now to come and work with people on the East Coast till about May. So I'm working one-on-one with people, and I'm going to be doing some smaller group ceremonies with no more than 10 people. These are retreats that are about 3 days long. And then I'll be in LA. I'll hopefully come down and see you. So I'll be down in San Diego area. I'll go back to Santa Barbara. So that'll take me until about, oh, then I have to fly back to the East Coast to work with some people because of scheduling. Then I'll go back to the West Coast to work with 1 or 2 people there. So basically, I'll be in the States on either coast from the 24th of March till probably middle to end of August. And yeah, I'm happy to speak with people if they're curious about my work, whether they want to do some integration work with what they've experienced thus far. A lot of people come to me once they have had an experience and they're not sure what to make of it, or they haven't had the support, whether they want to sit with me and resolve it with medicine or with no medicine and use the IFS model. I'm happy to do that to facilitate. I'm not attached to one way of working. You know, there's different ways of working, and if it's outside of my reach, I'll happily refer to them to the right people that I trust. And if not, then I'd just be honest with them and like, this is outside of my reach, and I'm not honestly sure where to go about it. But yeah, I'm happy to speak with people, and if people need to sit with me privately or invite me to sit in a group sitting with a couple of their friends, I'm happy to entertain that idea. Absolutely.
Wonderful. And would you be willing to take a question? We have a question that came in.
Bring it in. Bring it in.
Julie asks, I imagine having a breakthrough or a transformation through medicine may come stronger than through normal healing means. Can you speak to how this large change can be integrated and maintained? Great question.
Sure. Yeah, great. Really, really great question. This goes back to, again, looking at your container first and foremost, Julie. Oh, yeah, Julie Montgomery. Okay, friend of mine. Yeah, so basically, first element is to look at the container, like the house that's keeping you safe, and look at it and be like, okay, what are the elements that can help you? What are the elements that are non-healthy for you? What are the elements that are destructive to your well-being? And ask you, are you willing to make shifts? Just like you were working with people, Marissa, and you're like, well, your relationship with food or your relationship with your body or exercise needs to shift. Otherwise, you're going to have a high blood sugar level and you're going to have hypertension, and this is just what's going to happen. And yes, here's a menu. I've created a menu for you that'll help you in your healing process, but it's entirely up to you. So that's one element of this healing. And the other element is, again, as the shadows rise up and you become familiar with the shadows, you understand the distortions that those shadows took on. These young parts of our minds that took on these distortions to make sense of what was happening to us at the time of the trauma or the experience that we were having. So we are informed by our past. A lot of us, we're walking children. We may have grown up in older shells, but a lot of our mind is actually informed by when we were very, very young in our formative years, right? So interfacing with those parts that have distortions, embracing them with love, and telling them that it's okay, that they don't have to suffer anymore.
That's beautiful. I love inner child work. I'm always encouraging everyone to do inner child work, whether that's through hypnosis or even just closing one's eyes and visualizing the younger side to themselves. And what I love about your work is the love that you bring to all aspects. I think just loving the shadow, loving the inner child, like loving ourselves completely. Like that's just the biggest lesson, I think, in life. It's been my biggest life lesson thus far is the self-love, loving everything that comes up. And I love also that we are normalizing the conversation on trauma and on, the difficulties, and just bringing that vulnerability to the forefront. Like you said, I think that's easy for women to go there and to be vulnerable, put it all on the table. I am, calling for the men in our world to step up and to do the same with their vulnerability. Men are just as vulnerable and have experienced just as much trauma you know, as women have. We've all experienced it. And I just really appreciate that you're making this conversation more accessible, and just allowing people to heal on a deeper level, because I truly don't think that 10 years of psychotherapy is going to give you, you know, the same kind of benefits and breakthroughs that you'll have with just diving deep with
Well,
plant medicine, different
uh,
substances.
a few things. Again, you brought up some really, really great points, and I want to distill that and address a few things. When we adapt and we harden to our woundings, you know, vulnerare, the wounding and the hardening, we lose connect with our essential self, which is all love. Really, we are born out of love, hopefully, you know. We are essentially really at our essence without the wounding, without the you have to be this as a woman. God, I don't know how it is to live as a woman. I'd fucking lose my mind. You know, you have to be this, you have to look this way, your hair's got to be this, you have to drive this car, you have to wear these shoes. It's all must, because it's coming from a place of dictating what you must be in order to find approval and love.
Yeah.
And our society, runs on that fuel, and it's really, really insane. And for men, it's some of the same expectations, some other expectations, you know, and
Yeah.
really being okay with just being with yourself, and being okay with yourself is part of the first part of healing, and being like, I'm fucking okay. I don't have to be this. I don't have to check off these 30 things that you must do before you're 30 list on Facebook. This is mental,
Right.
you know?
Hmm.
Um, and another point you made, you know, I think the strongest people, the strongest men or women, are the ones that are open to receiving and admitting that they may have wounding, being open to sharing with what is in their hearts. You know, as men, we're taught to don't feel, forge ahead. You must do this, you must provide this. There's really no space for many cultures for men to be with themselves. You know, men are inherently competitive. So guess what? Men can't be together in an open-hearted way, which is one thing I do. Actually, I do men's ceremonies where we can just be together and unfold. Um, so that's another thing that I want to remind people. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to be vulnerable, especially when you've been
Yeah.
wounded.
Yeah.
And for me, it is coming from a place of love, and really ultimately meeting people from absolute love, and putting my sexuality, my history, my identity, all that out the door when I step on the mat, and I'm there as the conduit or the hollow reed or the empty bone, to be present with what is and what rises without interfering as much as possible. You know, I'm there in body, obviously, that I can't change, but I try my very best not to bring my own stuff, and really allow people to unfold the way they need to unfold, which is absolutely necessary for this kind of work. And the
Absolutely.
last point you made, Marissa, you know, anecdotally, you know, we were talking about some of the people that I've worked with, and you know, and I was talking about implicit memory that has no words, right? And those memories inform us, right? So, one person that I worked with had birth trauma. As a result, she was in all these disembodied experiences. She was not in her body. You know, she would self-harm just because she wanted to feel. But essentially, what ended
Mhm.
up showing up in medicine is that she had a birth trauma. You know, and that really basically was rooted in all of her issues. And it took 3 sessions, and she's been in therapy with a therapist, psychiatrist, taking medication for 17 years of her life. And then we sat in 3 sessions, and guess what? Here you go. And
She's healed. She's probably doing better, I
a
imagine.
lot better. I mean,
Hmm.
substantially better. It's incredible.
And can I just ask real quick,
Sure.
like, you know, how does one identify birth trauma through just normal psychotherapy? And the answer
I
is
have
you
no
don't.
I
You
have no idea.
you have to drop down into the subconscious. This is what I
Yeah,
learned doing like learning hypnotherapy, using
yeah,
plant medicines. We cannot access those memories in a
yeah.
normal waking state, and it's
Yes,
so important to drop into a
yeah,
subconscious state, to
yeah,
drop down below.
yeah,
And you know, there are only a handful of ways to do that, in
yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. And how do you know that it's that double-edged sword? And how do you know the thing that you don't know? And how do you go treat
Mhm.
something that you don't know that you don't know?
Yes,
Again, it's like,
exactly.
oh, so go to see a shrink and take some Prozac and take some Zoloft, and take some Wellbutrin, and then that all
Yeah.
screws you up, and then you're walking on as a ghost. And
Hmm.
maybe that's what you need to do to support your family, to do the work you need to. I don't begrudge people. I have used those medications before I left my body and realized what my problem was. And had I not
Hmm.
done that, I would have probably been hopped up on some shit as well. So I don't begrudge people. I don't think it's a bad thing that they're doing, but if people are tired of the same cycles, if they're tired
Hmm.
of the side effects of all these medications that they're taking, if they have the support and they can withdraw from those medications, which in of themselves cause so much harm. I mean, it's mental again. Like when you were talking about mental, it's completely insane. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, it works and people need it and people take it. But if you can do this work, should you be supported and sit with the right people and all the other elements that we discussed, um, and get to the root, get to your thorns and extricate yourself and the thorns and heal yourself from it. Oh my God, life just unfolds and you're like, oh my God, I no longer need to carry that with me anymore.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
magic.
It blossoms. It's pure magic. And I have another thing that came up that I just want to talk to you about. I'm fascinated with this idea of like toxic spirituality and law of attraction and manifestation and kind of like covering up all the wounds and like thinking that these affirmations are going to get you somewhere else.
Yeah,
In my opinion and in my experience, we have to look at the shadows before any of that stuff even
yeah,
works. Otherwise they're just going to be nagging, nagging, nagging. You're going to be hooked to
yeah,
those traumas still. And any amount of positive affirmations and law of attraction is not going to work. And while I believe we shouldn't focus on our problems and focus on what's wrong in life, you probably agree, what we focus on expands. Um, I also believe that we have to go back and look at this stuff. We have to do the shadow work. We
yeah.
have to heal it in some way in order to realize that other realm that people like Joe Dispenza, talk about. I think the true healing comes when we look at the shadows.
Thank you for that again, Marissa. I wish we had 10 hours to talk and people's
We have 12
interest.
minutes.
Yeah. So, listen, whatever you feel is going to help you is going to help you, and you're going to do that, right? And this is, like I said, this is not the work that is necessary or appropriate for a lot of people. Maybe people don't have access to it. Maybe don't have the money there's many different factors. These manifestation coaches, I mean, I call them, humbly bees and feathers. It's just like decoration and the easy way to patch, just do this, write your manifestations on the board 5 times a day, and magically they'll, happen. You'll get your red Rolls Royce. That
Yeah.
to me is complete spiritual bypass. And
Hmm.
it's just like, okay, just act positive and be positive, and all these positive happen. But maybe you need to ask yourself, why is it that I'm not feeling positive? Why am I finding myself in these cycles? Why am I being abused? Why am I in abusive relationships? Whatever. Like, those are the things that we need to look at, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, yes, we should not be dwelling on the pain, right? Maybe though, we need to dwell on getting to a point where we understand where the pain is coming from,
Hmm.
right? We need to be okay with ourselves with where we are, but then be like, okay, where is this coming from? What is it rooted in? I need to be honest with myself. And it's really, really difficult, Marissa, because what happens is we start to identify with our disease. We start to identify with our diseased body. We start to identify with our diseased mind. All the elements in our life start to meet us on that level, and that can actually
Hmm.
contribute to our attachment to that identification. So guess what? You will remain in disease. Because in some ways it's actually easy because yeah, you got mom and dad cooking, and then your finances are covered by your husband. I mean, this is one of the cases. And
Yeah.
I will just be in this diseased body because that's the way I adapted to a narcissistic father, and the family dynamic that he created. My brother had to, become narcissist and vie for attention, and I became the victim, and that's how I got my
Mm.
attention. And
Right.
that served that
Right.
person to a certain degree. But you know what? Let's look at that and be honest with that. But it takes a lot of courage and determination and the will and the support to want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So writing 5 things on the board every day in the kitchen, I don't think is going to cut it for you if you're in that state.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes.
I agree. And I think something beautiful that COVID brought us worldwide, right, is the time and the space to sit and reflect. I think more than ever, people have had an opportunity to sit and reflect on their lives, and it probably hasn't been easy. It's been painful for many people, but I think the self reflection piece is key. And you brought this up in the beginning of our conversation, how Western society celebrates pushing and going and going and going. And when you're going so fast and doing so much, you don't stop and reflect.
Yeah.
And so maybe this has been a reset for many human beings to have the time and space to reflect on life and on who we want to be in this world, what gifts we want to bring, the legacy that we leave, all of
Yeah.
these things. Would you agree that like maybe 2020 helped many of us just
Uh,
reflect more?
and here I am from the dark side. So if you want me to be honest, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think that well, I think that we're very, very resilient human beings, and we'll come up with any means possible to avoid looking at ourselves. So even if you're locked up in a box, you're going to Netflix and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. Certainly, if you're seeing people die outside, and there was a refrigerator truck right outside of my apartment in Manhattan, it's very real. My partner's mom died of it. So this stuff is very real, right? I grew up in a war-torn country. There was bombs literally falling not too far from me. So I was like, well, there's not bombs falling and there's no AK-47s on the street. I'll manage, right? But
Right.
for a lot of people, they have had the good fortune of never being exposed to anything or any sort of adversity.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people just keep on piling it on so they don't have to look, right? Some people certainly do, and I completely am on board with you, and I don't disagree with you. But again, people have to get honest with themselves. Look at what they're doing to this planet. Look at what's happening. This is Mother Earth saying, you know what, kids, just wait.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for human beings, and and I know, not until people break do they want to have a look at themselves.
Yes.
But you know what? When the planet breaks, that's it. Game over.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
True.
So I'm not that optimistic. I know that there's pockets and conversations are starting to happen. But it's really, again, being honest with ourselves and what's going on? What is my part in all this? Have I been complicit in this? How can
Yeah.
I shift my ways? Right? What is my relationship to the people? What is my relationship to my work? Again, looking at the contingency, do I want to continue living in this insane world and participating in this insanity, or do I want to extricate myself and look at myself and my life differently, and maybe do things a little bit differently that will reflect well on myself and my personality and what I do for the outside world, as well as what I do for myself and who I become as a human being.
Yes. Yes. So much of that. Yes, I agree. And we have 6 minutes left. It's been a
Great.
wonderful conversation with you. Can you tell people who are listening and people who are watching this replay how to get in touch with you? And I encourage everyone to follow Payam on Instagram. And how can we continue to learn from you, or how can
Yeah,
we best connect with you? What's the
absolutely.
best way?
Thank you again. Instagram, I'm at Payam, Payam _healing. My website is payam.com, Payam.com, and M like in Mark. Yeah, I'm really accessible. When I'm working with the people, my attention is diverted and my energy is with them. But I am responsive, and I can, get back to people. I'm just a person, and I do what I do, and it's really helped people. So I encourage people to reach out should they want to talk with me and be like, what are you about? And how can you help me? And I'm happy to have that conversation. I'm not too precious about my time, although I have to respect my time a little bit more.
Yeah.
But Marissa, one thing I wanted to say, and I'm happy to continue, but this is really, really important. I was kind of thinking about a remark or like kind of a leaving thought
Hmm.
that I wanted to do before we say goodbye. Listen, to the audience and to everyone, the healing is within you. It's always been there.
Beautiful. The healing is within each of us. I agree, and thank you for being a guide. Thank you for being someone who bridges the spirit world and the Western conventional world. Your work is so needed right now, and I appreciate you being brave and courageous to step out. I know this isn't easy work for you, but I know I can tell that it's fulfilling your life purpose and your mission, and I know that you bring so much love and compassion to this work. So thank you so much for doing this interview with me. It's been lovely, and I'm excited to meet you in person when you're on the West Coast. Let's make that
Get
happen.
get get
Sure.
ready for a big hug.
Yeah, yeah. And thank
And
you everyone
yeah,
for tuning in and for being interested in healing and in the use of plant medicines and in just taking all of this wisdom and this knowledge and making it your own, and also continuing down your healing path and your journey to become more whole. So big blessings to you, Payam, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
thank you so much. Thanks everyone.
All right, bye everyone.
Take care.